Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and to the ranking member and to the witnesses today for your testimony. I have to say it's been interesting to listen to the concerns that have been expressed about the budget because, of course, you know, there were people who were perfectly prepared to see NASA operate under sequestration levels, which certainly would never get us to an overarching vision to make our way to Mars and back. And so I'm glad that we're tried to change this conversation a little bit and look realistically at what it is that that the space community needs to do, the scientific and research community, but also NASA. I've been really, and I am, Dr. Magnus, one of those people who would probably certainly volunteer to leave this committee in the Congress and go to Mars and not return. But nonetheless, I do think that there are some questions that we need to answer, and I think, Dr. Magnus, you've laid those out quite well. I'm curious as to what you all think the Congress needs to do in terms of directing NASA in terms of a timeline to provide a roadmap that would be reasonable then if we were to proceed along this goal to 2021 and then into the 2030s. So do we need to be more directive in terms of asking for something back from NASA by a date certain? And do we need to say to the agency, you and who else around the table should come up with the roadmap and the plan? My fear is that it might be left to members of Congress who have no real scientific expertise at all to be able to determine whether it's the moon, a Lagrangian point, the International Space Station, or an asteroid that makes most sense for precursor missions to get us on our way to Mars. And so I would hate to leave it to us to do that, and I'd like you to help me think through who needs to be around the table and by when do we need something so that we can begin the kind of planning that we need for budgets and program. And so any of you, if you have some comments about that.
Congresswoman, let me just take a quick stab at that, if you will, from perhaps a little different perspective than some of the other witnesses might espouse. I would hope that the Congress would look at NASA as an agency from an enterprise perspective. And by that I mean, when I go back and look at President Bush's original space exploration program that was laid out and the commission that I served on as part of that, we looked at the broader sense of space exploration. Even the space policy, the new space policy that Scott talked about, looks at space in the holistic sense. Human space flight is just one element of that. And I would hope that the Congress, when considering budget needs and budget concerns for the agency, will look at the broader context of space exploration, and even, if I add for the first A in NASA, the aeronautics needs for this nation, and look at it from a broad sense of understanding how all of those contribute to the needs for the United States, whether it's addressing other national needs, as I mentioned earlier, or whether it's addressing the broad needs of space exploration, but look at it all in a holistic manner, not just human space and going around Mars.
Thanks, General Lyles. Dr. Pace?
Thank you. I would actually say that the 2010 NASA authorization bill, certainly at the policy level in terms of framing what the Congress's priorities are, is really quite good. I mean, I would personally like to see some of that language maybe incorporated into the national policy. So in terms of philosophy and priority, I think that's already there. I think we know some of the constraints that bound the analysis that NASA would have to do. Continuing the space station through 2024, the capabilities of SLS and Orion being available. We know the international community longer term is interested in Mars, but we also know the international community in the nearer term has coalesced around cislunar space, the global exploration strategy, the technical discussions that the International Space Exploration Coordination Groups have done. They all see cislunar space as an area that's challenging but reachable for them to do. So those major pieces, space station, Mars, the cislunar space operations, where the international community is, those major pieces are actually all largely in place. So the analysis that needs to be done is more at the cost, schedule, and risk standpoint, which I think is within what NASA can do. And if you
So when should we expect something like that back so that we can begin to act on it?
I think if you tasked NASA to generate some architectural trades like that, and they put some series of efforts into it, I think on the order of a few months would be perfectly reasonable. Tons of these architectural works have already been done. Doug Cooke has done and read most all of them. I would be hard-pressed to think of one he hasn't read. And so the material and information is there. I think it's really the cost and the budget analysis and the programmatic phasing of what's sustainable is really the biggest uncertainty.
So is it a matter of simply giving NASA a directive and a time frame so that we can then get on the process?
With some clear constraints, and that if certain requirements can't be met or certain budget caps and whatever can't be met, then a prioritization of what you relax. So a sense of priorities in order for programmatic management trades to take place.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.